Looking for a workout program? Lucky for you, I know exactly who you should go to. 18 Alpha Fitness. That's at 18 Alpha Fitness on Instagram or 18alphafitness.com. Kevin Edgerton, owner-operator, not only has he been through the selection courses as a Green Beret, he's also picked up a whole bunch of medical credentials. And then on top of that, he's been a coach within the Air Force Spec Warfare pipeline. And I've seen the results, and the results are good. Very successful. So Kevin is that perfect merger of experience, both as student and as cadre. And he brings that together with the science. And he's always learning as much as he can. We've had him on the podcast. He'll tell you all about it. So the flexibility, the breathing, the strength, the conditioning, and not only will Kevin tell you what to do, but if you follow Kevin, what you'll realize very, very quickly is that he still lives that lifestyle. He's got an old gray beard, and I'm still scared of him. So head on over to 18 Alpha Fitness, use your Ones Ready code, get your discount, and let Kevin help you achieve your goals.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Ones Ready podcast. You're in the team room here with, it's just me, Trent, and Lt Grieser. So the guys thought that I needed a therapy session because I'm going off the deep end. So we decided to bring the doc in, talk about all things, ANS and everything else that she gets into at her job, but she can describe it a lot better than I can. Doc, welcome to the show. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me here. So I'm currently the senior operational psychologist at the Special Warfare Training Wing. I've been there since about August 2020. And before that, I was the embedded operational psych down at the 26 STS at the garden vacation spot.
Yeah. So you must have had, almost no work there because everybody at Cannon is super happy and psyched to be there and no issues.
Yeah, it was a cakewalk. That location has its own challenges, but I think overall it was a great 4 years.
I don't know how many times we have to say it, but everybody in the Air Force knows it. They've been told a million times, your location is what you make of it. And I guess I'm a senior NCO now because I just regurgitate all these things that people used to say to me, like, oh, it's what you make of it. And now I actually believe all this stuff. Doc, how do you get to be a senior psychologist, operational psychologist in the Air Force? And then how do you get into the special warfare realm after that?
Yeah, so I think that speaking to psychologists that are interested in pursuing that career path, it really depends on making connections and showing competence and capability in your primary AFSC, and then showing interest in doing more of the human performance operational type applications of behavioral science. That's pretty much it.
Always,
there's no
tips
secret
and
formula.
tricks, right? Secrets and everything because everybody's holding everything back. How did you get into special warfare? I mean, because it's a pretty niche market, I would guess. Is it just something that you wanted to do, or something that just kind of fell in your lap?
A little of column A and a little of column B. So my background is actually in health psychology, which looks at how your thought processes and your health behaviors impact your overall functioning and performance. So it marries very well with human performance optimization, which is most of my job now. Several years ago, I want to say in between 2012 and 2014-15, I was at Bulford Hall working in the health psych program there, and I somehow got linked in with what was then the Combat Control Schoolhouse to work on some of their stress inoculation training. That was through networking with another psych who was doing the work, and they needed a helping hand, and I was there and eager and willing to do that. And from there, it just grew. Then when the psych position opened up at Cannon, I was given a call.
Just taking opportunities when they come and then jumping in feet first. Okay, yeah. So your position down in the Special Warfare Training Wing, we have a few different courses down here, Lackland local. We have the prep course, the ANS course, and then the pre-dive course, I think, are the ones that everybody thinks of, and the TACP apprentice course. Which ones are you most involved with right now?
So most of my time is spent supporting assessment and selection. And then when I'm not supporting that, I am either kind of collaborating with and managing the psych efforts across the wing. We have multiple psychs that are embedded with us, or I'm supporting the TACP pipeline and supporting any wing initiatives that are going on. So it's a busy and a very multifaceted job.
I mean, the TACPs are all just crazy anyway, right? Exciting. Can't you just like write them off and be like, these dudes, okay, they're different. They're like, we're like all different, and then they're like different, and they're just like, you guys go. No. Right.
Everybody has
Are you
their
allowed
own
to say
flavor
crazy?
of crazy, right?
It's funny because like we were talking before we started, and I knew your predecessor, and everybody's like, oh, like psychologists don't say words like crazy or that, like I just find it refreshing how often you guys talk about, at least the folks at the Special Warfare Training Wing, is just open and honest about everything and kind of making jokes that sometimes, but also like when it comes down to the job, I think people would like to know, at least I would like to know, like what are you looking for? Like, what is your role with the students? Because with the new ANS, we get a lot of questions about, what are the standards? And we're like, well, like there's like physical things you have to do, and then there's also psych docs there, and they're like, well, what does that mean? And we're like, I don't know what do they do? So like, I don't know, like, is there like a process that you go through with the students that kind of determines whether or not they're going to make it? Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give away the secret sauce, right? But psychs are very involved in the entire assessment and selection process from the beginning to the end. So all of our candidates, pretty much as soon as they enter what used to be called the prep course, now it's called SWIC, they'll do a battery of psych testing and they'll fill out a lot of background information. The psychs look over all of that material, and then candidates that make it to assessment and selection start off ANS during phase 0 with several days of psych interviews. Each candidate only goes to one psych interview. They're not doing psych interviews day after day after day. But because there are so many and we have a limited number of psychs, we just have to take up a few days to do that. From that, we make hypotheses about the candidate's goodness of fit and ability to succeed in the pipeline, eventually in the operational units. And that's really what we look for when we're there observing events. We're looking at, all of those behaviors that are tied to the attributes that I know that we've talked about, right? That you guys have talked about on the podcast before. We're looking for those same kinds of things, those non-technical qualities that might make a good person and a good holistic all-around operator. And then at the end of assessment and selection, we advise the hiring authority on our recommendation, and that's where it goes from there.
Right, but
we're just tiny piece of the puzzle,
I think, man. People out there are like, oh, the psychs are involved. Like, I think there's understanding. So we stole a little bit of the assessment and selection model from like the tier 1 units. But as a candidate comes in and they're 18 years old, what's the difference there between, if I go up to the other side of the fence, and I'm an older operator, I'm experienced, they're looking to see if I'm good at my job. And, there's obviously a psych eval up there, but like we're looking at, 20s, 30s, older folks that are kind of a known quantity. What's the difference between looking at an 18-year-old off the street versus an older operator?
Yeah, those older operators, they're definitely going to have more cemented skills and techniques and ways of demonstrating their capability. And we totally understand that in the younger candidates, they're still so fresh, right? They haven't had that time to mature and really practice and get reps in some of the skills. But I think that we're doing a really good job yet of finding behavioral markers of the attributes that we want to see. And those are definitely present in some of these younger candidates. Every single assessment and selection, I am wowed and amazed by the presentation that these candidates bring forth. It's encouraging and it's heartening for me as a psychologist to see the kind of product that's entering this pipeline. Now, for some of those, the younger candidates, that may be listening right now, maybe they're on a sports team, or they're doing extracurriculars, or they're pursuing academics in high school or college. The kinds of attributes that we look for are the kinds of things that'll make you successful in those areas also. So are you a good teammate? Can you engage in delayed gratification? So for the good of the team, right? Like putting other tasks or pursuits before your own selfish or self-centered pursuits. Are you able to communicate well with other people on your team, especially under times of high stress or adversity? These are all the kinds of things that, as psychs, we keep an eye out for, not only for the people that rise to the top, but also for the candidates that might not be able to handle that kind of stress.
I'm glad you said reps, because if you say reps, then I'm assuming that if you're deficient in some of these skill sets, these psychological skill sets, then you can build these, right? Because we're talking about people that their brains aren't even formed yet. But like, I think there's an idea, at least maybe I'm just the only dumb person out there that's like, hey, if I get removed from A&S for psych, or if I don't get picked up, like, how do I get picked up the next time when I come back in 24 months? Like, how do I get those reps in?
Yeah, that's a really great point that you bring up. And it's actually something that as a program, assessment and selection has evolved to incorporate. You know, we're constantly leaning forward as a program and looking for ways to be better and more effective and more powerful in terms of bringing on the right people. One of the things that we do now is everybody that makes it to the end of assessment and selection, whether they get picked up or not, they're going to get pro dev feedback from a team. So a cadre and a psych sit together in a room with the candidate in front of them, and we'll tell you, here's how you performed. Here's what you were really good at. Here's where you're not so good. And even for the folks that get picked up, we give them some of that critical growth focused feedback of, here are the things that you need to keep focusing on. Just because you made it to the end of assessment and selection, right, you really just got a ticket to ride the pipeline. You know, you're not done yet. And for the students or the candidates that don't get picked up, it's important too that we tell them, hey, if you're interested in coming back and reassessing, which is for most folks a very high probability that they're going to do that and they want to do that, here are some specific things that you can start to work on. Maybe it's your critical thinking. Maybe you need to engage in more intentional problem solving type things so that your thought processes get faster. Or maybe you need to work on managing your frustration with your teammates and how you communicate that during times of high stress or high pressure. But we'll tell candidates, you know, what they can do to work on to come back and really put their best foot forward.
I'm going down memory lane in my brain. As an instructor, before we had like all the psychs on board, and I remember watching candidates during high stress start to get real frustrated and start yelling at each other. And I remember in one instance, another cadre member like wanted to step in, and I was like, don't you want to see where this goes? Don't you want to see like who is the person that steps forward that makes the team actually accomplish the mission, like helps everybody, brings them all back together, gets past the frustration and accomplishes the mission? Because that's really what we're looking for, right? Is recognizing when things are going wrong, and then recognizing what's helpful and what's not helpful, and being the person that can get everybody moving in the right direction. I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, you're spot on. And during assessment and selection, the candidates get plenty of opportunities.
As you're sitting there with a psych doc and a cadre member, were you all ever like off in the beginning when you first started doing this, and have you gotten closer, or did you find like from the very beginning that your assessment and the cadre assessments generally are pretty close?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do find that they line up, right? We look at things through different lenses, but the sight picture of what we're looking at is the same object. And so we'll come at it through different avenues of approach, but we usually see the same kinds of things. Every once in a while, just because of the depth of data that sight captures, we might pull out some things that the cadre didn't get a chance to see or observe. But that's usually pretty rare. Usually what we see shows up in what the cadre sees.
Okay, so there's nothing magical happening in the background. Mm-hmm. It's when we tell people, be a good person, work hard, you know, manage your stress and all these other things. It's I don't know. I think we kind of make a big deal at A&S, and I just don't think it's as complicated as maybe it seems from the outside, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, it's
you're giving it away.
But
yeah,
like
not.
One of the things I saw a lot when I was down at the prep or the SWIT course was candidates would show up, and they have built this pipeline and this assessment up in their head so much and made it like this monster. And it's like, guys, like whether it's a monster or an elephant, right? Like how, all the stories we tell, like all the things we tell candidates, like one bite at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time. And so like, I think taking a little bit of crazy or, you know, shine off the assessment selection course, like it's hard. It's going to be hard, but like, we're still looking for the same people that we were looking for 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, now we just have a more robust way of pulling out all the data points. I'm really glad that you brought up the prep course, SWIC, because one of the other initiatives that Psych has done over the past couple of years is embed a psychologist specifically there, and we are now part of the course instruction. So there's a psych that will teach you about the attributes that we look for, so that the candidates start to know the language, and they start to get those reps. They start to get practice in, okay, how do I take my internal self and show these kinds of things that the community values?
Right.
So
Not
I think
Spotlight
that's a huge
Rangers,
step
just
in
being
that
the
direction.
type of person we're looking for, right? Can I ask about a word we hear a lot?
Yeah.
At least I heard a lot, and it's grit. What is grit? Because everybody wants to say it. Like, it's out there beyond special warfare. Everybody talks about it, and everybody's like, we need people that have grit and all these other things. Like, but what is it, and is it actually measurable?
Yeah. So when you think about grit, there are a lot of notions that play into that: perseverance, hardiness, resilience, which I think is such an overused word, but it's a valuable word because a lot of people hear it. But really, it's that ability to weather a challenge and bounce back, or not just bounce back to where you were, but even grow from it. I once had a mentor, another operational psychologist, who said, pain plus reflection equals growth. And it's such a simplistic formula, but it's so pithy because you can really unpack that. The pain piece, you have to be willing to put yourself into uncomfortable situations and not shy away from that. It doesn't mean be a masochist and be foolhardy and take unnecessary risks to prove yourself. It just means that when things are difficult and uncomfortable, lean into it. Don't have that response or that reaction of backing away. Then the second part of the formula, reflection, means that you have to have and cultivate that level of insight to really sit down and hold the mirror up to yourself and critically evaluate how you handled the experience of that discomfort or that pain. What were the things you did right? What were the things you did wrong? Sometimes that reflection can even involve asking a mentor or a peer or a friend for feedback and saying, hey, from your eyes, how did I handle this? What could I have done better? And that's where you really get to the output of the formula, which is the growth. And when I hear grit, or I hear people talk about grit, or people ask, what does it look like when somebody has grit? I would say that they're engaging in that formula. They're encountering discomfort, they're engaging in reflection, and then that's what results in the
I've never heard it put like that. And one of the things we talk about, all of us older guys, is it's difficult to take your career and your deployments and all the bad things that have happened and explain why you feel like you're such a better person on the back end of that. You know what I mean? Like, and people are like, well, you did like these things and all these bad things happened. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but like, as you get older and you go through these things and you do sit back and you reflect about it and you see where you made all your mistakes and you grow, like you don't want to take like all those bad things and say like, well, this was really good for me. Like, how do you explain that to people? Like, all these bad things that happen are really good for me. But I think in the training environment, it's definitely there. What would you recommend for the reflection piece in particular? Because the students are busy. We're constantly distracted by, everything in this world right now. How do you get to that reflection? Because I think the pain's easy. We bring the pain to them, to their doorstep. You know what I mean? Like, how do they get to the reflection piece?
Yeah, you give them ample opportunities to experience discomfort, no doubt. I think that within the pipeline, one of the ways that we've leaned forward is we've incorporated self-assessments and peer assessments in a structured fashion throughout every pipeline. So PJ pipeline, combat control, an SR, and then even the TACP pipeline, they have opportunities to rate themselves in a structured manner. And then a little while later, they'll do a peer rating where other people tell them kind of how they're doing on our 8 attributes. So again, it's attribute anchored. And that's a great way for standardized reflection and growth. We track that in a system called Smartabase, which you're probably familiar with, but it's a way that our students, once they enter the pipeline, can see all kinds of data about themselves. And this peer and self-rating is one of those pieces of data where they can see progress over time. So a student can look and say like, oh, I'm not doing so well at problem solving. They can work with their instructors, they can work with peers, they can work with the op psychs that are spread out through the wing, and we can help them figure out how to brush up on that attribute or how to strengthen it or kind of reinforce it, reinforce that structure. And then later when they do another self-assessment or they get the peer assessments, peer ratings, they can see if they've improved on it. I think that that's a good way to put that
I
reflection
agree.
in.
And you brought up something. I was talking to another doc on Instagram the other day because I spent time on Instagram, but we were talking about like the younger students, and I think what y'all are doing and helping the students just identify and put into words some of these things that are happening is incredibly important, because I've sat in counseling sessions with students before where they dump a whole bunch of stuff on me, and then we have to sift through all that and try to distill it down to what's actually happening. So y'all coming in and saying like, this is what this is and this is what this is, when they approach a situation, they actually have that, like you said, that language to identify, and then the tools to overcome it if they've put in the time.
Yeah, man. And it builds a culture too, because the way that we develop these attributes in conjunction with RAND, we didn't come up with this stuff ourselves. RAND went out and spoke to the operators that are out in the gaining units, right? They're the training wing's customer, and they developed through discussions and focus groups and reviewing the literature, they developed this language that really captures what we're looking for. And since we're instilling it from the very beginning, when the students enter SWIC or the prep course, it creates that common operating language. So then when these students graduate the pipeline and they get out into the operating units, the older hats are speaking the same language as them. And so when somebody is struggling or somebody is failing, or even if somebody's doing really well at something, you can pinpoint it and say, man, your communication skills are on point. Can you teach that to other people? Or you're really struggling in some of your teamwork applications.
Well, and I think just getting into the habit of that peer feedback too, as assessing yourself and that peer feedback, as you become a supervisor and everything else on the team, that's just going to create a way more healthy environment moving forward. Because you think about the teams that you've been on that have been the best is everybody's comfortable with each other, everybody understands their role, but they're also comfortable telling you when you're not pulling your weight, and they have the language and the reps, just like everything else, right? The reps to be able to do that. I want to step off here for a second and give you the opportunity to, I don't want to say complain, but enlighten us on the misconceptions. Jump right over to what is it that everybody thinks about your job that's incorrect or slightly off?
Oh man, so much. So when I first got out to the 2-6, right, everybody's like, Doc's just here to tell us we're crazy, or to pull us off of jump status or flying status, or, docs are just here to judge all the time. And to be honest, if I were to engage in that kind of immediate judgment, I'd be completely ineffective at my job. Doing this kind of job really focuses on moving operators, when I was at the 2-6, and students and candidates and even permanent party faculty or staff from now, moving them to the end of the spectrum where they are maximizing their wellness, their readiness, their effectiveness as a human. We like to say that we make operators smarter, faster, deadlier. And you have to push people towards that end. It's really not so much working with the really severe issues, although we can do that too. Ideally, we can work with people before things start to become a problem. So if your sleep is starting to get a little out of whack, or you're starting to feel irritability in circumstances that you normally wouldn't, having a psych doc that's right there, elbow to elbow with you right down the hall is the perfect application, because you can, have those hallway consults where you're like, Doc, is this weird? This thing that's going on with me? And I can help you fix it before it becomes a serious problem. So I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions. Another big misconception is that there's no confidentiality with us, when really there's a lot of confidentiality with psych docs. There are just some very limited conditions under which we have to, raise the flag and say, hey, we might need to get some other entities looped into this. And that's really under extreme circumstances, like you're a risk to yourself, or there's something super serious going on.
I remember the first time I went and saw a psych doc way back, and I walked into his office, and you can feel those things building up. And I walked in, I'm like, Doc, I'm thinking about punching this dude in the face. And he's like, first of all, no, you're not. Sit down. Let's have a chat. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, don't talk about, but he understands that, that's just kind of how we talk. I'm not actually going to go assault someone that outranks me, probably.
Right.
I walked into his office because, you feel those things building. And I liken it to every once in a while, if my back goes crazy, All right. And so, sorry, folks, we had a little technical thing, but like I was saying, the psych docs that I talk to, I just like medical docs, usually if I'm not taking care of myself the correct way and I need a boost back to normal, that's usually what starts the conversation. And I found that the more times that I go there, just like with the medical docs, like if I'm going in there for my back every year and drugs are required, like that's not the ideal solution. So like as I've gotten older, it's more of a consistent care thing instead of just abusing the doctors and like me just waiting until the wheels are about to fall off and like running into your office and being like, Doc, like things are bad right now and I need you to fix me. And I think with the starting so young, y'all are really going to do great things for these guys moving forward.
Yeah, ideally we can teach our students and our candidates the skills to self-manage things that are really common that come up, like, your circadian rhythm getting thrown off, or having some increases in irritability, or not feeling comfortable handling certain types of, relationship communication things. If we can teach you those skills early, then it makes our job so much more efficient, because now we can focus on moving you from good to awesome, not just trying to get you from meh to good.
Is meh a technical term thrown around in the
psych community? I'm pretty sure it's in the DSM. Yeah, as a diagnosis. Meh.
Okay. Well, and you come up with the common problems thing. Like, what are some of the common problems that we see coming in the front door these days? And are they the same problems that we've had forever?
Well, I haven't worked at the training wing with really young folks forever, so I'm not really sure, how it's changed over time. We get a lot of homesickness, motivation type concerns, at least from the students and candidates that present to our psych doc that's over at the SWIC program. And those are totally normal things to have to struggle with in your 18 to 20-year-old formative years. That's fine. It's okay that you struggle with them, because if you weren't struggling and seeking out help, it means that you wouldn't necessarily care about them. And we want you to care about addressing and fixing these concerns. Some of the things that we see in our candidates that are a little bit older, definitely frustration with injury. Everybody wants to be at the top of their game all the time, but that's not reality. Sometimes you get hurt, sometimes you have setbacks, and we're there to help walk you through that mental space so that you don't start circling the drain of that frustration. So we can help you get back to optimal functioning as soon as possible. When I was at the 2-6 with some of our older operators, a lot of it was relationship stuff, managing the ops tempo and balancing family demands. Sometimes it was talking through some of the gnarly stuff that they had seen or done, which is totally normal to want to talk through those things. And it's good that they did. Sometimes I wish they'd talk about them a little bit sooner rather than waiting until the very end of their careers when they felt like it was okay to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of us have gone through stuff like that. And I think, based on my understanding, like I have a toolbox, and I'm pretty good at using those tools in certain situations. And when you're on team and you're always like in the honeymoon phase or the leaving phase, and those tools don't necessarily come into play as much because your relationship is just so short-lived most of the time, or you're away, and you develop all these tools overseas to solve those problems. I think there comes a time in your career when maybe we should sit folks down and be like, okay, like you're going to be home now. Things are going to be different. Like, and you need some more tools, because you can't use a sledgehammer for everything.
I really like that analogy that you brought up. And it's true. You need to diversify your tool set, because you're not going to build a very good house if you just use a sledgehammer for everything. Sometimes you need a little bit more nuance. You bring up, sitting with somebody and saying, okay, how do we make that transition now from using one set of tools to the next? And I'm not sure if you had this with your docs when you were up at the 2-2. Yeah.
I was at the 2-3 was my last STS.
All right. Yeah. So down at the 2-3, one of the things that psych docs commonly do is when the teams are coming back from deployment, we do a deployment debrief with every single one of them. And we'll sit down and say, okay, what was your experience like? Here's some common things that you can expect as you transition back to home and home life. And how are we going to work through those?
Right. Yeah, and I always bring up how old I am, I guess, because I'm always like, I remember my first deployment, I came back, and people are probably tired of me talking about it, but it was basically a high five, go back to your apartment and sit there for 2 weeks. You enjoy your CTO. So like we've come a really long way, but I don't know, personally, as I've gone through my career, like you said, the first time a psych doc shows up at the unit, everybody's like, what's happening here? I don't want to go talk to that person. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't have feelings. But I don't think that's what we're doing, because you talked about earlier about making people more lethal. And so like there is a battlefield application to what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe that's a subset of the op psych skills that I neglected to bring up before, but we do get training in how to assist some of these more specialized activities that the operational missions take on. And so we can really partner with the instructors or the team leads that are doing FMPs, right? So full mission profiles, or they're doing just different kinds of trainings, and we can advise on how to make those more realistic, more effective, how to up the stress in ways that aren't necessarily physical, so that the teams that are doing the training really get to feel what's going on. It's inoculation, right? You need to practice how you play. And there are certain things that we can't replicate stateside, but there are a lot of ways that we can help make those trainings more effective.
Right. No, and I think it's important for people to understand is the better you handle these situations, both overseas and at home or whatever you're doing, the quicker you can turn, the more efficient you're going to be. And that's good for everybody. Like the goal is to make the team as efficient as possible and as deadly or whatever as possible. So, for me, that's one of the misconceptions from a site, because it's all like, you come home, talk about your feelings, what happened, like that's everybody's first impression. That's my first impression. But it's never like they can make me way better at my job, or help me be better at my job and get out of my own way a little bit so that I can go overseas and be who I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
for sure.
Let's talk about the students again. I know I'm bouncing around. So if I was at A&S, they'd be like, your thought process is not very linear, and I'm not sure that you're a select. That I think for people out there, understanding that the stress of basic training, a new environment, new people, you're going to get sick, like the cortisol that comes along with that and all those other things. I think we poo-poo it a little bit, because Air Force basic training is not physically demanding for our candidates typically. But you are like, there's a lot of stuff that's thrown your way. And so when they show up at the SWIT course and we don't understand why they can't physically perform the way that they said they did back home, I think there's a lot of that stuff that we're just not taking into play. I guess I'm just asking you to tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not full-time over at the SWIT course, but so I can't speak to things that are outside the psych lane. I do know that they have strength and conditioning coaches that'll go over and help the BMT students with some of their workouts, which I think is a good step in the right direction. I also think that there are things that potential recruits who are interested in this career field can start doing even before they come to BMT, so that they have the skills on lockdown right before they have to use them. If you wait until it's crisis time to use a skill, it's going to be too late. So things like, that stress management toolkit that might really help in BMT, or even during SWIC when things are getting hot and heavy, learning how to control your breathing so that you can control your heart rate, so that you can control the cortisol dump and everything else that comes with the fight or flight response. That's crucial. Learning how to get really good at imagery so that, when you are having to practice a skill or a task, just like in sports, right? I ran cross country and track for years and years. And so before every competition, I would imagine myself running the 100-meter hurdles in intense detail for probably a week and a half ahead of time, just practicing my performance up here so that when the real day happened, it wasn't as big of a deal. And I think that our potential recruits can practice some of those skills too.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I remember when I first got into like the DEP program, when a young Trent Segmiller, when I was doing push-ups at night, when I was getting ready for Air Force BMT, I would imagine some dude standing over me yelling at me. I'd imagine people getting all the things you see in the movie, getting up in your face and spit and all that other stuff. And I'm not sure how much it helped, but I definitely, like when you're approached with a situation, and I know that visualization is not the same thing as the real event. but it has to help. Like I've been a fairly successful person. I'm not that smart and I'm not that capable, but I do visualize things over and over and over again, almost ad nauseum, to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, we can talk about your negative self-talk a little bit later, but we'll work on that after the cameras are rolling. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Good approach. Make it as realistic as possible.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the things I've written down. How much fear or anxiety or trepidation is normal for a student? Because I think I talked to a lot of students at the prep course and as they were moving into ANS, and they would be like, this idea that just because they couldn't see fear in the other candidates, that it was unique to them. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's not unique. I think everybody has their own level of anxiety and discomfort with what's about to happen to them, because very few of those candidates know exactly what's going to get thrown their way. But that's intentional, right? We need to knock the candidates on their back foot a little bit to see how they can react and respond to those kinds of stressors or challenges. I think that if you're thinking that you're feeling it worse than everybody else, it's probably, just what you see, that's through your lens. There might be somebody to the left or right of you that is thinking the exact same thing. I think that's why forming peer networks and finding a trusted person that, whether that's another candidate that you can kind of throw these ideas back and forth with, can be really helpful, because it'll normalize that experience.
Right. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things that all the older guys talk about. I look at other people, and instead of being like, they're not scared, I think if they're going to make it, I'm going to make it. Like, how is this person on the positive self-talk side? I'm sorry with my other stuff. If that person is capable of making it, then I can make it. And as opposed to like a lot of these students will look at other people and be like, if that's the candidate that they're going to choose, and candidates have a bad habit of assuming that they know who's going to get picked up at ANS, and then they did this. The comparative stuff is just toxic, it seems to me. And maybe I think you guys have fixed a lot of that stuff since I've been gone. So like I'm probably just talking about stuff that you guys already fixed, and it is no longer an issue for the candidates.
Yeah, it's true though. If somebody is prone to getting wrapped around the axle in their own head, then SWIC and especially ANS is an environment that's ripe for that to get out of control. So if you know that about yourself, and you know that you tend to start engaging in those thought patterns to the point that it leads to being disruptive or unproductive, start working on that ahead of time before you get through our doors. And there are lots of ways that you can do that. The Special Warfare Training Wing Insta site and the website, those often contain, tips and tricks for preparing yourself for the challenges that you're going to see when you get to us.
Are you on the Instagram site? Because I think that there should be like a Psych Monday message or something every week. Because the reason I say that is we do the podcast and we have the Instagram and everything like that. One of the more frustrating things is people want very specific advice for because we're talking about reps and we're talking about practicing these things. And I know there's somebody out there being like, but what exactly should I be doing? And so I think if we had like a Monday message, from you, so that they know it's from you. I'm not telling you what to do, obviously.
Thanks for tasking me. I like that.
That's an asker. I can't task anybody. Anyway, I'm just throwing it out there because we are going to get the questions like, no, like what is she talking about? Like, what specifically should I be doing?
Yeah, that's a good idea. There are a lot of, I think I'm trying to look it up right now. There's a human performance resource center page. I think it's HPRC. I'm trying to verify that on my phone. So
no worries. We can just put it on the YouTube description and on IG when we drop this.
Yeah, perfect. It's hprc-online.org. And that has all kinds of human performance tips and tricks. It's done. The website is hosted by the DoD, I think, the CHAMP, so Uniformed Services University. So it is military focused and it's across all branches. So it's relevant to everybody, but it has tips and tricks on nutrition for performance and different types of workouts that can be really effective. It also has a huge page on different mental strategies and techniques that you can use to make your toolkit as robust as it possibly can be. So I like the Psych Monday. I might take you up on that, work with our PA shop to get that going. But in the meantime, the HPRC-online is an excellent resource for folks who are interested in really how to sharpen their spear in terms of military performance.
Right. And I love everything you're saying. I get excited about things. I'm an adopter. I like the whole psych thing. And I think if I'm a 17 or 18-year-old out there prepping to come into the pipeline, you should be integrating these things. I think nutrition and physical are easy things to get after. And you can see them on Instagram, like all the shredded people on Instagram and all that stuff giving you advice. But I think if you don't start thinking about these other things and spending time after your workout thinking about how you got through it, what your barriers were, and developing those tools to get better at that, then you're probably not setting yourself up for maximum success.
You bring up a really good point. These mental skills are like muscles. If you don't use them, you lose them, and you need to start doing the practice early so that when you need them, they're strong and ready to go.
Doc, you're too good at answering questions. You're very concise. You're like a lawyer. And so I think I'm out of stuff. So I think the last thing would be moving into the future. Oh, actually, one last question. Is special warfare different? Are our people actually crazy? Or we just think we are?
It takes a special kind of special to do this job.
So that's where my negative self-talk comes from, is the psych docs telling me you're right. As we move into the future, sorry.
Just to close that out, though, I think that one of the most rewarding experiences I've had professionally is working with this community, because overall, and I'm not saying this just to stroke egos, you guys are smart, you're driven, and you're hungry to always be the best. It makes my job easy when folks are motivated like that, because then we can really partner together in making somebody the most well-rounded, best human being that they can possibly be. So if you guys are special in any way, I think that would be the biggest takeaway.
You got to be trainable and competitive, folks. As we move into the future, I think it's awesome that you've had that experience at the 2-6 and also over here. As if you were the boss over all things psych in the Air Force for a day, moving forward, especially within special warfare, like where are we going, and how far can we take this thing?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. I think that right now we're currently doing a good job of exposing our very young Air Force psychs to this kind of world. There's an Air Force residency program at Lackland, so right there in San Antonio, and they have the opportunity to come and spend an entire month with the special warfare psych docs learning all about assessment and selection. And so I think that getting this into people's minds early, that this is a very fascinating and unique application of behavioral science, so that if they want to pursue it in their career, they know about it early instead of finding out about it when they're 5-10 years into their work in the Air Force. So I think that that's a really important thing, making sure that psychs know that it's not just all clinical work. Although if they want to do clinical work, that's fantastic. And there's a huge appetite and a need for that too. But the demand signal is just growing for psychs that can do command consultation and executive coaching and the human performance stuff that we've been talking about. It's not slowing down. That train is full steam ahead. Right.
So when you're going to start deploying with us, is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, I have a few times already. So if I could have my way, everybody would.
No, it's been a while for me, so I'm sure things are getting better all the time. You got anything else for anybody else out there? Any final advice for the folks?
No, this has been a really great opportunity. I just hope that candidates who are interested or recruits who are interested in special warfare really take to heart the fact that being a well-rounded person is really what we're looking for. And there's so much of that that's within your scope of control. You can start practicing all of these skills early so that when you get to us, you can really put your best foot forward and knock it out of the park. For the folks that are already in the pipeline or that may even be permanent party out in the operational units, I hope that they came away with a better understanding of how psychs can team and pair with them to make them the most effective human being they possibly can be.
Awesome. Perfect, Doc. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. This is Doc Grieser. For everybody else out there, train hard, and we'll catch y'all next time. Later.
Thanks.